So I went to a progressive voter rally, Bernie Sanders thing today, and I had some really interesting discussions with people. Um, Many of them said that in the next couple weeks, they may be signing off away from being a Democrat. And what was kind of interesting is a lot of these people were not just straight Bernie supporters. A lot of them were like Elizabeth Warren supporters. Some of them were Tulsi people, Yang people, a mixture of progressives. And of course, there was a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters, but you always hear the Bernie Bros narrative, and they are the problem, and it doesn't seem that way. Um, the interesting thing that I heard a lot of them say was we're going to have to see in a couple weeks, because if a couple weeks Bernie Sanders is not the nominee and he's even further back from being the nominee, then they're done. They're out of the Democratic Party. And it's not because they didn't get their way. And many of them said, look, we expected the establishment to coalesce and beat up on Bernie. We expected that to happen. But it goes deeper than that. And it's something that I found kind of interesting. Their thought process in this is that the Democrats decided that before Bernie Sanders can take the party and hand it back to the people, the Democrats said, we're going to burn it down. Because if we lose, our donor class still continues to keep the party and they still win with Trump winning. And that was the whole ideology behind their whole thing about we're just done being a Democrat. And I thought that was interesting because I never looked at it that way, and I think there's some definite merit to what they're saying. Um, we have seen this with the establishment over and over again. Trump is the worst president. Trump is awful. Trump is this, that. And then when Bernie starts running, Bernie's the worst person. His people are Nazis. But the one thing that we never see from the establishment is them ever actually push a candidate. It's almost like, hey, we're going to sit here and complain, but we're never going to throw out any ideas for ourselves. Because if our ideas get shot down, well, then it makes us look foolish. But now we can do it at the right time because here we can have enough to beat the progressive candidate, but then we'll lose in the election. And part of this really does come down to who the establishment picked. Like, if the establishment got behind Kamala Harris or Pete Buttigieg, but I really think Harris would be the way to go. Um, she could have beaten Trump. I mean, and I know that many of you who follow politics are like, yeah, but she dropped out like 3 years ago. Yes, I get it. She wasn't getting the support. She wasn't getting the donations. It was just a really, really broad campaign field. So who was going to back who? Biden had name recognition. Certain people had, either some form of celebrity or they had deep pockets. And Kamala Harris really had neither one. But for the establishment base, she would have been perfect. I mean, she's a pit bull. I mean, just vicious as hell. She is woke enough, but also it was a pretty kind of dickbag of a prosecutor. She's African American and she's a female. So, oh, and the best part for a lot of them is she's in that range where she's young enough where the old people would support her, but she's not too old. And definitely like she's not too young to where the old people would be skeptical of her. She was really in a good spot. And if the Democratic establishment really wanted to win, Kamala Harris would have been their choice. But it's like they don't want to win because Trump is really, really helping their donors out a lot. I mean, the tax cuts alone, what, 83% of those tax cuts are going to go to the top 1%? Well, who do you think is donating to the Democratic Party? To the 1%. I mean, they're in a win-win really, because as long as Trump keeps winning, he's keeping himself making these policies which are awful. And the Democrats can say, "Oh, he's horrible. He's forgetting the middle class worker and the average working family and blah 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 blah." Meanwhile, they're enjoying every second of it. There's only a few politicians who legitimately have problems with a lot of Trump's policies. And this is the whole thing. Because ultimately, the Democratic Party as a whole has hundreds of years of experience. They have uh, hundreds of different strategists or analysts and all sorts of staffers who know far more than I do. But there's no one who can convince me that Joe Biden could beat Trump. I mean, why would they put Biden up there against Trump? I mean, if this was some sort of like, let's say, the Super Friends has been used, or the Avengers, or whatever, if they were all gonna, form the Megazord, so to speak, why would they have Biden be the head? I mean, Buttigieg would be a much better prospect from what's left. And like I've said, I think Kamala Harris would have been the way to go. But it's almost like, no, 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 no. We don't want to tarnish our party with these awful plans that only serve the rich, but we want to enjoy on these. So we don't want to run anybody. I mean, Joe Biden, I actually feel sorry for Joe Biden in a lot of ways. He is losing it massively. And yeah, I put up some pictures that are some of them making fun of him. And whatever, but when I see him live and I hear him speak live, I actually understand just how fragile his brain is. I mean, he slurs every other word. He goes on pointless stories. Sometimes he becomes really angry out of nowhere. Usually at his average, rally goers, probably usually a supporter or someone just questioning anything he's doing. And he'll come out with "You're a dog-faced pony soldier." What? What are you talking about? I mean, he forgot the Declaration of Independence? I know one thing to be evident. All men and women are created, you know the thing. Yeah. That's who they're running against Trump. If there's nothing about Trump, because Trump is very hollow when it comes to policies, and he's very uninformed. To be honest, he's rather ignorant. If it comes textbook to textbook, a Bernie Sanders or even a Cory Booker could beat up Trump. But Biden is just as hollow. And again, a majority of the Democratic Party is also incredibly hollow. I mean, they've had 4 years to lick their wounds and to think about what happened. And this is the guy they put up there? Arguably worse than Hillary Clinton? I mean, it's hard to say. Towards the end, Hillary was passing out and, already screaming about problems that happened that didn't actually happen. And, she had a backlog of corruption against her, but Joe Biden might have more. And regardless, either way, Joe Biden has more corruption than Trump. There's no way you can go get across that. I mean, Joe Biden's has been there since like 1863. He's had a lot of opportunity. Trump's only been there for 4 years, and yes, he has created quite a pile of corruption, but nowhere near what he could pull out on Biden. And it doesn't even matter because Trump doesn't play that tit for tat, that virtue signaling, I'm better than you. No, he just says, hey, you're a corrupt asshole. Defend it. And, Biden could somehow come out and say, well, I have my problems, but you're corrupt as well. And Trump would say, yeah, because I'm a winner. You're a loser. And people would cheer and laugh because he's good at that. He is really, really good at that. Biden, though, halfway through a debate will probably forget where he's at. He'll probably forget the references he's supposed to bring up. I truly believe, especially after talking to these people tonight, the Democratic Party doesn't want to win. They're out for a loss. They're just looking to put a ringer in, and a really bad one at that, and just bet on the other side. I don't know. I've been very torn about this. I'm curious what you guys think about this theory that I've heard, and if it makes sense. It's been the only thing I've heard lately as far as the Democratic Party and all this goes. It's the only thing that actually does make sense to me because the Democrats have been running this awful coalition of establishment nobodies. I mean, the people, like, yeah, they should have got behind. I mean, if anyone, Buttigieg. Even Buttigieg, I questioned. I don't like Buttigieg. I think he's very fake, plastic. He definitely reminds me of Christian Bale in American Psycho. But he's clean cut, young, kind of looks like he could do it. He could be the new Obama guy. Again, I don't think he could win, but more than Biden. I mean, Bloomberg and Biden were the two. I was like, there's no way. And it took Obama in this like sinister, bad guy role behind the scenes in those dark, smoke-filled rooms that they all say they don't want any part of. It took him in those rooms to coalesce everyone to put Biden over. And I mean, it's really sad because it is like they're dragging a corpse into the middle of the octagon. And I'm really not overstating that too much. It's really, I don't know. I couldn't figure out why they're doing it, and that seems to make a lot of sense to me. Anyway, I'm curious about your guys' thoughts on that. If you think there's any truth or any validity to that theory. Um, Also, if that does happen, moving forward, what happens to the Democratic Party? I've talked about this with the Republican Party. I think the Republican Party is in danger of being gone. Are we gonna form a third party, like an actual third party? And who's gonna be in that party? What what way is that party gonna lean? I mean, I've argued for a while now that we only have one party right now, and it's just how far left or right you are of the donor class. Both sides contributed to it a lot. I mean, it's basically the elites against nobody, and we might get a champion every now and then, but he always ends up having handicaps that end up making him lose. Or if our champion wins, he's easily manipulated. But yeah, I'm curious about all like where could this all lead to? What could be the fallout if we get to a place where we really don't have two parties anymore? Anyway, curious what your thoughts. Have a good evening.